The idea that somehow you're in the wrong and you have to be re-educated, that in a way is a form of fascism, isn't it? I mean, it's the kind of Nazism that someone like Trudeau would profess to hate most in the world. And
No, having board certification medical professionals who can in some ways determine whether or not human beings live or die is not Nazism. It's good for public health. Do you want to be operated on doctors who aren't board certified, Pierce? Is that what you want? Do you want to have an operation? It's like, well, you know, I don't actually want to go for all of these quacks who have to go through all this woke professional endeavors. I'd rather just get opened up on the street by, you know, someone who's willing to talk to me about, you know, the 1776 project or some shit like that. Piers Morgan and Jordan Peterson, uncensored.
again, by Jordan Peterson. Jordan, it's been 1 year, can you believe that, since you came and sat in my studio and we had what was an extraordinary interview, got very emotional one part of it. A, can you believe it's a year? And what kind of reaction did you have to that interview? Because some of the clips went so big and everyone was having a view about it. What was your reaction?
Well, I enjoyed talking to you, and I'm never that happy really when I become emotional about something that's being discussed, and sometimes for me that's a consequence of not exactly optimal health. You know, it makes me a little bit more emotionally fragile than I'd like to be. But
is that why you're writing all the racist poetry right now? Just so much racist poetry. Why are you doing that, Jordan?
The same token, I wasn't unhappy with it. I do still hold to my belief that I am addressing a loss, a demoralization among young people, and maybe particularly young men, and that I don't feel that there's anything inappropriate about that. And you know, I have toured all over the world, and I've seen the extent of demoralization among young people, and it is very affecting if you have a clue, as far as I'm concerned. And so we touched on that, and I mean, other than that, I was very happy. I was very happy overall with the interview and with the manner in which people received it.
I was too. I had an extraordinary reaction just in the streets, you know, of London and New York, and people coming up to me wanting to talk about it, wanting to know what I thought of you. And it made me realize just how wide your influence is and how important you are to so many people, especially actually young men.
Is it going to be an hour of this? I can't sit through an hour of this, Piers. Come on. And that's why you're simply one of the most incredible individuals who's ever lived. A hero, a king among men, some say. Not myself. I think you're a god emperor who should be worshipped.
How do you feel about that influence and power that you have through that influence over so many young minds?
Well, I hope it's
so
not
great.
power, you know, because power is not a good thing. You have to be a fool to want power. If it's influence, that's a good thing. If it's an invitational influence, that's a better thing. If it is the sort of influence that encourages people to stand up on their own and to help them believe that they can do that and that they should do it and that the world is a lesser place if they don't, then that's a good thing. And I do think that that's what's happening. That's the story.
Yeah, but it'd be nice just to have that and not all the fucking transphobic racist garbage that is the baggage that comes with your fucking self-help life shit, you know? You can say, hey, everybody, you should be the best version of yourself. You should consistently work to improve yourself in all manner of things. You should work hard. You should improve yourself. You should live healthier. You should help others. Empathy is a many splendid, beautiful thing that human beings experience. Do all that shit. Absolutely. That's it. You don't need to add, Elliot Page's abs glistening in the moonlight reminds me of mother's brush. You know, like all that shit.
And I would say it's daunting because to understand that the message that you're conveying has played an important part in people's lives is an immense responsibility.
Yeah, I hadn't even noticed that. What is this disaster? Like, I'm not gonna fucking front that I have fashion sense. I don't. Okay, like I'm very well known for just putting on t-shirt and jeans like every fucking day, but like. Even I can tell there's so many conflicting things going on.
You have to handle that with all due caution. You know, I do everything I can in my lectures and when I meet people, when I talk to people, to be pleased as I can possibly be that they're positively affected by what I've been doing. And I would also say, you know, I'd like to distinguish it too. I don't like to think in some ways that it's what I've been doing. You know, I'm an educated clinical psychologist,
that's
and
better.
the reason that the words that I'm using and the stories I'm telling are having an effect is because they're deeply grounded in a solid scientific tradition and also in a solid philosophical, psychological, and theological tradition. And insofar as the message that I'm conveying has potency, it's because of its fundamental grounding in those underlying traditions rather than something that is directly a consequence of me or should be attributed to me. And I know the difference between those two things, you know, and so I'm careful to try to make sure that I don't confuse the messenger with the message, let's say.
Right. I interviewed Steven Pinker recently, and he'd always said for years that we've never had it so good as a planet, that statistically, whether it was poverty or health or age or whatever it may be, that on almost every recordable metric, this is the best time to ever be alive. And I asked him whether post the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis around the world, did he still feel that that held true? And he said yes, that actually despite that, this is the best time, actually in many ways, to ever be alive. When I read your Twitter feed, which I find fascinating, exciting.
Steven Pinker has been so thoroughly debunked by this point, by the way. Like, all of his fucking statistics and all of his information just completely plummet in free fall if you remove China from his historical analysis of how the quality of life has improved globally.
Challenging, combative, but often quite furious. I get a sense of somebody quite angry with the state of the world. Is that a fair reflection of your state of mind about the world? If so, why?
Well, we've swapped adventure for security. And Pinker rightly points to the fact that on the grounds of material security as well, satiety, satisfaction, let's say, we're doing better than we ever have. But people aren't built for infantile satiation. They're built for truthful adventure, as far as I'm concerned. And so to the degree that we've purchased security and safety at the cost of existential adventure, that is not an advance. Now, I think, being optimistic like Pinker, that we could have an adventure. We could have our cake and eat it too. Let's put it that way. We could make the world an abundant place, and there would still be room for an adventure for everyone. But I think the existential or the enlightenment types like Pinker, they make a mistake when they presume that mere material well-being is sufficient to provide people with the meaning that's necessary to offset the fundamental existential uncertainty of their lives. You know, we're mortal creatures, and we're prone to decay and to the loss of everything that we have, even if we're rich.
Yeah, Steven Pinker was friends with Epstein, right?
That. And I don't think the Enlightenment types have done a good job of addressing that at all. They don't really understand, or they refuse to understand, the depth of that spiritual longing. Am I angry?
Steven Pinker's aid in Jeffrey Epstein's legal defense.
Angry?
Steven Pinker is blocking anyone that mentions Epstein on Twitter. That's why he blocked me.
No, I wouldn't say precisely so. I'm upset at many things that I see. I think the net zero move is a travesty in 5 different dimensions. I'm absolutely appalled that the globalist utopian elitists would sacrifice the poor to save the planet, especially when there's no evidence whatsoever that they're actually effectively saving the planet. And we could take Germany as a case in point there, and I would say the UK to some degree. But I'm fundamentally optimistic. I think that human beings can solve any problem that's set in front of them. And this is also another place where I think the apocalyptic utopia.
Yeah, you can be optimistic. I'm an incredible optimist, right? It's almost to a fault, and still recognize what's happening around you, and not try to deny it and or run fucking shade for the entire climate movement in the process by being like, oh, bloody hell, the whole thing is just outrageous, all this woke cancel culture trying to remove methane.
Have got something seriously wrong. Like, they basically take a zero-sum approach to economic analysis of the world. We have finite resources. There's only room for a certain number of people. And so, of course, that begs the question of what in your world you're going to do with all those excess people. And we have to move towards degrowth, or there's going to be an apocalypse. And I think everything about that set of presuppositions is wrong. We don't live in a zero-sum universe.
He's describing climate fascists. He's describing people who talk about, like, oh, the problem is humanity. The problem is there's too many people. And oftentimes it does have very racist roots, because the largest, population or the densest populated countries in the world aren't the ones that are contributing in the same way to climate change in a lot of other parts, right? Like India, for example, or like look what happened in terms of the flooding in Pakistan, and the amount of percentage that Pakistan as a country was contributing to CO2 output globally, and it's like, it's not necessarily fair. So yeah, anyone who's talking about depopulation is right there in the fucking the fucking that corner of climate fascism, essentially.
The apocalyptic outcome.
That's not what the climate movement in any way is advocating for.
isn't necessary. And the more fundamental truth of the matter is that if people adopt subsidiary responsibility, and we could get into what that means, and we organize our social hierarchies
Malthusianism.
effectively and generously, we could make the desert bloom. We can make much out of virtually nothing. And human beings have that capacity because we can transform cognitively. And
is that what you're going for? Just like, you know, let's spend billions of dollars to create a artificial city or artificial forest or some kind of growth in the deserts. That'll solve the problem. We'll make the deserts bloom.
No reason to assume at all that we couldn't have more than enough for everyone. Now that would mean those who want more for themselves than for other people would have to let go of that essentially power-mad desire and be willing to share and be willing to raise the poor out of poverty. And of course, doing so decreases the gap between rich and poor, and that's very annoying if you're narcissistic and rich.
You spoke last night, actually, at the Buckley Institute in New York, and you said something really interesting to me. How do you have the adventure of your life, you asked the people there, including many students. And your answer was, tell the truth. And then it's so bloody interesting and engaging and exciting that it justifies the misery of your existence. What can I tell you? There are great books. Read them, ignore your professors. I did love that because actually there is a real power, isn't there, to the truth, particularly in this era, I think, where there's so much untruth and disinformation flying around. Actually being true to yourself.
You've got Jordan Peterson on your show.
Is probably the most powerful thing you can be, I think.
Well, you can think about that in two ways. I mean, the first way is, who are you if you lie? Now, I would say, well, you're false if you lie. That seems self-evident. If you're false when you lie, then who are you? You're not you. And so then whatever happens to you when you lie, that isn't happening to you. And the theological view of that is that whatever happens to you when you lie is happening to the spirit of the lie, right? And the spirit of the lie, classically speaking, is a demonic spirit. And so whatever success you accrue as a consequence of lying isn't your success. It accrues to the glory of the spirit who lies. And that's a very bad idea. But then as well, the adventurous element of the truth is associated with the following idea. I mean, I could come on this interview, let's say, and I could have been thinking this morning, well, what in the world do I want to accomplish if I get to talk to Piers Morgan? I'm going to talk to several million people. How can I grow my brand? How can I use this opportunity to ensure that people feel better about me or admire me more, or something hypothetically self-serving, eh? But it's not self-serving exactly. It would serve a very narrow part of myself. It would serve the narcissistic, self-aggrandizing, whim-oriented, hedonistic element of myself. And maybe I would confuse that with myself, but that would be foolish. And then maybe I would get what I aimed at, and I'd have an impressive conversation with Piers Morgan, and that would redound temporary to my glory, and I would walk away satisfied.
Man, he's so humble. I love this. He's trying to basically posture right now that is like, you know, a lot of people would take this as an opportunity, obviously, to further their own interests, but like not me, because I have a better understanding of truth. I understand that truth is not simply a lie or a fabrication of my own self. It's separate from that. And the lie itself is, of course, demonic. And we can understand that it's not revealing a part of yourself necessarily. It's revealing the demonic history and the fable behind the lie.
But the problem with that is it's a stupid goal. And if I attained it, that would just make me successful at being foolish and narcissistic. And the consequence of doing that repeatedly would be that I would become more and more foolish and narcissistic. And there's no success in that. Even if I got rich doing that, I'd be rich and pathetic. And
you did get rich doing that.
That's not helpful. And
you are
alternatively, I could come on here and I could just try to say what I believe to be the case. And then that would be me. And it would be the truth. And then I would be aligned with reality, which seems like a good idea, you know, because if it's you against reality, like, good luck to you. But there's more to it, Piers, because, see, if I want to come onto your program saying, just say what I think, I have to throw caution to the wind. I can't be calculating the outcome. I can't be, like, what would you say, referring to an opinion poll and telling people what they want to hear. I just have to lay it on the line. And to do that, I have to let go of the outcome.
This is the biggest the most long-winded version of saying, like, you know, hey, I don't play by the rules. I'm not going to do all these narratives that they want me to say. You know, I'm rogue.
But the cool thing, here's the cool thing. If you let go of the outcome, you don't know what's going to happen. And then that's so interesting, really, that it's almost unbearable. And that is definitely something so interesting that it's almost unbearable. That's an adventure. And then you get to have an adventure. And then you think, wow, well, this is so interesting. Maybe it's worth sticking around for and trudging through the misery just to see how it ends. And I do believe you capture that in a relationship with the truth.
Well, yeah, I guess that it is pretty nice too when you get zero pushback. It's like, there's absolutely nothing that Piers is saying in contrary to anything you've proposed so far. Like, yeah. Yeah, it's really challenging, you know, being unorthodox and not saying what you want to hear, Piers. Brilliant. Tell me more, sir.
I truly believe that. I don't mean that mystically even.
I agree. And what's fascinating, actually, is that whenever I've interviewed you or done your podcast, and I'm feeling it again now, I agree with so much of what you say, but that's not really the point. I believe that you come from a place of authenticity. And I think there are other people like that. Joe Rogan is another one that I watch him. I don't always agree with him, but I always feel he's authentic.
Hell yeah.
In a different way and to a lesser degree. But I think the point's the same. Someone like Andrew Tate, I can see why he resonates so much with young men in particular, because much of what he says.
What? The guy who has said on camera that he fucked a 16-year-old when he was an adult and is in recorded conversations talking about strangling and raping someone? Surely you don't want to be associated with that, right? You wouldn't want to be in the same breath, you know, compared to that other truth sayer.
They feels a void in their lives where they feel oppressed as a group of people, and he gives them a sense of empowerment. So I get that. And it's interesting that I cite the three of you because Gavin Newsom, who's the governor of California, and many think may end up being the Democrat nominee for the presidency next year, he said this. He said, I had a very serious conversation with my eldest daughter about the chat bots on Snapchat. I really worry about the misinformation, disinformation about what's happening with our country. But I really worry about these micro cults that my kids are in. I say micro cults because I don't know if there's a better way to describe it. My son is asking me about Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, and then immediately he's talking about Joe Rogan. And I'm like, here it is, the pathway. And when I read that, I sort of laughed because I thought, what pathway do you think that is?
Well, that statement was unconsciously comical in 4 dimensions, which is pretty remarkable achievement as far as I'm concerned. I mean, first of all,
what is it with the right and the obsession with defending people?
Disinformation,
I mean, I think a lot of it's
the misinformation and disinformation that other people are spreading is like they immediately invalidate themselves as a serious observer.
It comes down to they don't actually care about sexual assault. They don't actually care about child abuse. They don't actually care about grooming. They all just want to weaponize all of those things to be able to attack their enemies. But when it is revealed that amongst them there is a lot of sexual assaulters, rapists, and groomers, well, then of course they're immediately going to start victim blaming. That's just like it's the right-wing playbook 101.
In my viewpoint, because they're basically arbitrary censors. I mean,
like when Andrew Callahan and the Channel 5 accusations came out, I didn't see every single leftist channel completely just like shut down and be like, I'm not going to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that. Yeah, I haven't seen the accusations, but I just want to say, first and foremost, it is kind of curious that they would come out at a time when he's becoming so big and prominent. It is kind of strange, you know, right now that Channel 5 just got their first fucking mainstream film, and now the accusations came out. Curious that, you know, that's kind of no, none of that happened. Everyone was very transparent and reported on it immediately.
Not as if we have some stellar and completely omniscient manner of distinguishing truth from falsehood, which is why we have free speech, so we can hash things out. And if people are foolish enough to believe that there's some straightforward way of identifying the purveyors of mis and disinformation, which is what the UN insists on now, then they are in fact identifying themselves as the prime purveyors of such falsehood, I would say. Then the micro-cult comment, that's just ridiculously funny, because if you are daft enough to think that Joe Rogan is a micro-cult, you live in 1995. Joe Rogan is the most powerful journalist who's ever lived by an order of magnitude. And if you don't know that, you're just not in the modern world. And young people are in the modern world, and they know.
Here's a true statement, because what he did there, he was tempted by the devil and he just told a lie. He's the most powerful podcaster, not journalist. Huge difference between the two things.
That Joe Rogan isn't a microcult, and Gavin Newsom might not know that, but that just means that he's anachronistic enough to be deluded. So that's pretty damn funny. And then the next part that's funny is that maybe if Newsom had a clue, he'd be curious about why his own children are interested in these microcults and exactly what it is about, let's say, Tate and Rogan and I that are grouped together, even though it's a strange grouping. I mean, I'm not particularly happy to be grouped with Andrew Tate because I think...
Well, I'm glad there's a bar somewhere. At some point, someone's going to be like, hey, could we drop just one of those names or something, or maybe replace it?
That there's some elements about what he does that are quite reprehensible, but that we could certainly...
He did date his daughter. That is true. This one's personal.
Talk about that. And so, you know, there should be some curiosity on Newsom's front, trying to figure out why it is that this degree of popularity exists. And then the pathway comment is also extremely comical. I tweeted out after that, it's like, well, yeah, Gavin, you better be careful. We're coming for your children there, buddy. We're going to turn your girls into women and your boys into men. And I know that
Why are you laughing? That's really weird. Really weird. This is one of the reasons why I can totally understand why a certifying board might be like, yeah, this guy shouldn't be a licensed fucking psychologist. You know, we shouldn't actually allow this to continue because he's just a bigot. The science is actually incredibly clear within his own discipline. You know, it's not like one of those people who can be like, oh, well, that's not actually what he's a doctor in. That's not his category or expertise. So, I mean, he may have a few like yikesy takes or something, but like, honestly, he's a mathematician. So why would he? No. This is his field of study. He is just completely refusing to learn anything new past a certain, I'd say Carl Jung, that's about where he stops. And then everything that's come after that is just woke Marxist babble.
That's a dreadful proposition, but, well, you know, it's just so preposterous. I don't know. Well, I don't know who he thinks he is in the most fundamental sense, and that's really something crucial since he's likely going to run for president.
Right.
And I don't know what world he thinks he lives in, but he certainly has virtually zero curiosity. You know, and I should point out as well, Piers, I have invited many. By
the way, that's so rich for him to say zero curiosity when, again, he refuses to learn anything on gender affirming care. He's just going to continue to spout bile and be obsessed with fucking Elliot Page's abs, and that's as far as he's going to go with it.
Many Democrats onto my podcast, and one has agreed, and that's going to be broadcast soon. But for years I've worked, and I have very many contacts with Democrats.
Who we thinking that person is? I got a guess. I got a pretty clear guess who that's gonna be. Yeah.
By the way, they're all terrified to come on my podcast. They won't talk to me. And so if it is a microcult, at least half the reason for that
Hello,
is
fellow
that the damn,
zombies. Hey, you're
useful
right. I should put
idiots
up our
on the
zombie
progressive
imagery.
side,
Hold
let's
on.
say, are too terrified of the woke mob to come out and actually have a conversation.
Oh,
Well, this leads me very neatly.
absolutely
He said it.
comical.
Right, well,
Bloody
that
woke
last sentence leads me very neatly to your bête noire, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the man who told us that the word mankind should be replaced by peoplekind, the man who virtue signals for the world and yet was caught repeatedly having blacked his face, and the man who only a few days ago joined in an ovation in the Canadian Parliament for an actual
But
Nazi.
to be fair, Pierce, this is kind of, you know, the crew that seems to enjoy that kind of stuff.
This is a guy who, to me, embraces all that is bad about the woke virtue signaling world because he's riddled with hypocrisy. I mean, when you saw the Nazi thing last week, what was your reaction?
I was thrilled.
Living in Justin
What a
Trudeau's
hero.
Canada, it's a never-ending hallucinogenic, surreal dream. Justin Trudeau's mode of governance is to top each scandal with a bigger scandal, and he's really good at that. So it's like literally virtually for the entire course of his governance, there's just been one scandal after another. And what happens is the newest one obliterates the previous ones in the imaginations of Canadians. And I mean, in the last 2 weeks alone, he managed to go to the G20, to alienate the Prime Minister of India, to start a trade war with India, to make the Indian government so irritated they decided not to give visas to Canadians anymore. And he did that to maintain his idiot coalition with the narcissist in Canada, Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the Socialists, who is just as bad as Trudeau and lacks his intelligence, which is a really pretty dismal insult, let me tell you. And then he called a whole sequence of protesters across Canada who are parents, led mostly by Muslims who are quite traditionalist. He called them misogynists and bigots, just like he did the trucker convoy. And then he invited, he set up the circumstance so that while Zelensky was there, there was a literal Nazi, SS Nazi yet, so like the best kind of Nazi, let's say, addressing the Canadian House of Parliament. And then when he apologized, because he eventually did, he really didn't take any responsibility, and he offered his own speaker as a sacrificial lamb. It's like, and that was just last week. And you might say, well, what's wrong with Canadians? And I can tell you what's wrong with Canadians is that Canadians have a very difficult choice to make. They can either wake up and realize that under the jurisdiction of this preposterous narcissist,
the best
compromised
Nazi,
virtually every institution of integrity in Canada, which is a really bitter pill to swallow, or we can assume that everyone who's pointing that out is some sort of conspiracy theorist. And it's way easier for Canadians to swallow the latter story than to actually contend with the true ramifications of the former story. Now, unfortunately, the former story is true. So that's okay.
Well, what is extraordinary? What's extraordinary about?
Long.
I mean, what's extraordinary right now? You've been ordered. I don't even know if that's the right word to use, to take social media training by a Canadian court, because you posted tweets criticizing the transgender and body positivity movements. My first question is
No, Piers. What? Do you not have a team working for you who can do any kind of research? He did a lot of things, and a lot of them are incredibly bigoted. I mean, his transphobia is just fucking amongst it's Matt Walsh tier. All right, let's get that one out of the way. He also, again, I can understand why a governing board who licenses psychologists would not want someone who mocks potential suicide. That's also really fucked up to do. Yeah, absolutely. And the same board isn't even taking away his license. They're saying in order to keep your license, even though you're not practicing, but if you want to have your license, we will continue to certify you if you take some online course training, because your online behavior is horrifying.
I mean, do you intend to do that?
And again, it's one of those things where an everyday person would kind of just embarrassingly do in the background without talking about it, not be like, oh, I can turn this into a cause. Yeah, everyone will get behind me. They'll be so excited. Free speech.
Oh, well, I've got all sorts of evil plans on that front. I mean, at the moment, we've appealed the decision of the court in Canada to allow the college to proceed with their re-education of me. Now, the re-education, what are the criteria of the re-education program is that I'm required to sit down with a social media expert, whatever the hell that is, because that's not a genuine occupation. I don't even know how you define it.
Yeah, when I worked for a visual effects studio, yes, that was a position that they hired, someone to manage their social media accounts. You most likely are making your daughter do that, I'm assuming. I'm going to assume, because she's pretty much been handling your social and that stuff for a while. You know, promoting your books, promoting your stuff. That's, yeah, online marketing. I know, the internet's crazy. It's got all these new things. There's new jobs that exist entirely because we're all interconnected on computers now.
And I'm supposed to also, as a clinician, be very careful about how I allow myself to be educated, let's say. I'm supposed to educate myself according to the tenets of scientific investigation, for example, or recognize clinical practice and social.
Then why do you reject it? Why, again, you know, this is something that is pretty well agreed upon amongst Canadian institutions in terms of gender affirming care, that trans people exist, that they're valid. That's not something that you've learned anything about. You reject it outright, and you're just like, oh no, I'm full bigotry. Full speed ahead, bucko.
Anyways, I'm supposed to sit down with a social media expert, and then I'm supposed to modify my attitude, however I'm supposed to do that, until they're satisfied that I've changed. And you know,
you don't even have to modify your attitude. It's kind of like, stop being horrifying. Stop mocking people unaliving themselves. Stop fucking attacking marginalized communities online. Those same marginalized communities that people within your profession are supposed to defend and protect.
It's not that likely, as far as I can tell, because I haven't changed since I was 3 years old, really, in some core elements. And I do that at my own expense for an unlimited amount of time until they've decided in their wisdom that I've learned whatever the hell set of lessons I'm supposed to learn. And so we've appealed that decision. We're planning, if necessary.
I love how he opened this by talking about truth, and that, like, how, you know, cowards are unable to actually, like, seek out the truth, and so they just live in conspiracy theories and lies and stuff like that. And then meanwhile, it's like, oh yeah, no, I refuse to learn anything. Oh, bloody hell, I don't even know what I'm supposed to learn. What are they even going to teach me?
To take it to the Supreme Court. I don't know if that'll happen. And but if it doesn't, then the next thing they have to do is take me in front of a disciplinary hearing, right, to sort me out before they actually throw me in front of the re-education specialist. And
but it's also,
up till now,
even
they've
as you're
made
telling this, Jordan, it's also preposterous, isn't it? I mean, the idea that in
how
a
dare
modern democratic
a medical
society, which
board
Canada purports to be,
have certification.
The idea they take one of its great thinkers, you know, clinical psychologist, like you're someone who literally is one of the smarter thinkers and brains in the country, and think that they can get a social media expert, whatever that is, to re-educate you about views that you honestly hold about some of the...
The Canadian public has nothing to do with this. We have no say. We're not a part of it. None of us are part of the board that certifies doctors in any capacity. That's not how this works. This wasn't a government decision. Did not come on down from Justin Trudeau. Even if he lies about it, that's not true. You see, in Canada, similar to in America, you have board certification for certain professions so that they can actually have oversight over those professions. You know how pilots have licenses? That thing. Yeah, it's like that. It's like that. So the board is the one taking upon themselves to do this. And again, it's the lowest stakes. They're not even taking away his license yet. They're saying in order to maintain your license, even though you're not practicing, but if you want to maintain your license, you got to take this course.
Sanity of the gender debate, or the insanity of the body positivity debate. I mean, we had a case here where Cosmopolitan magazine put a model on the front cover, 305 pounds, 5 foot tall, That is morbid obesity. And in the interview that accompanied it, not a single word suggesting this was anything but a positive image. And yet I knew that what they were doing was promoting an encouragement of this model.
Jack, because he's a complete liar, and you know how he opened this entire thing by saying like, oh, I could come onto your show, obviously, and have an agenda to promote my brand, but that would be exciting and let me have an adventure. I could say what everyone wants me to say and toe the line, but I'm not like that. I'm a maverick, and I'm gonna have an adventure right now live. Look at this, we're having an adventure quest. That is exactly what he does. And when it comes to this, like I said, most people wouldn't talk about this publicly with their public forum. They, in embarrassment, would kind of just sit back and either, yeah, maybe I don't need my license anymore because I'm not actually practicing anymore, I'm super famous from my lectures, or yeah, maybe I'll just take that online course and be able to, like, you know, get my certification back. He's like, I can turn this into a cause. I can get people to rally behind me. I can get fucking rubes like Piers Morgan to believe every single thing I say, hook, line, and sinker. And now he's on there being like, you know, like, bloody hell, like, is this at the end of the day, like, what is happening in Canada? In Canada, of all places? Are they actually trying to restrict your speech? Are they trying to, like, silence the greatest thinker in Canadian history?
To actually continue a pathway to potential early death because she was morbidly obese. By any clinical analysis. So the fact that you challenge things like that you challenge the gender identity.
Are you serious? Are you bringing up the fact that he, like, told a Sports Illustrated model that he would not smash, and everyone mocked him ruthlessly for it? Because, yeah, she was gorgeous. You should be so lucky, Jordan. Oh, yeah, no amount of authoritarianism will ever make me want her the way I want Grandma's brush. Never, mother, look. And everyone's like, Jordan, come on, my dude. Sorry, what are you bringing to the table here? Chad Alpha, meat-only diet man? Scurvy boy? What are you going to do?
The nonsense, which leads to biological males destroying women's sport, for example, all that kind of stuff. The idea that somehow you're in the wrong and you have to be re-educated, that in a way is a form of fascism, isn't it? I mean, it's the kind of Nazism that someone like Trudeau would profess to hate most in the world. And
No, having board certification medical professionals who can in some ways determine whether or not human beings live or die is not Nazism. It's good for public health. Do you want to be operated on doctors who aren't board certified, Pierce? Is that what you want? Do you want to have an operation? It's like, well, you know, I don't actually want to go for all of these quacks who have to go through all this woke fucking professional fucking endeavors. I'd rather just get opened up on the street by, you know, someone who's willing to talk to me about, you know, the 1776 Project or some shit like that.
Yet he's encouraging the demonization of you for challenging the insanity.
It's the world of evil clowns, man.
Trudeau's not involved in this. Again, the delusions of grandeur of the highest level, you know? It's not coming from Trudeau or the government. This board certification, you know? It's like if a doctor lost his medical license, you know, and he's no longer allowed to practice, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, that was Joe Biden. Yeah, Brandon did this to me. Joe Biden personally took away my medical license.
Preposterous in the extreme. I mean, you know, I'll tell you something else that's funny about the accusation. So so I'm being pursued by evil clowns that are incompetent, which makes it even more comical. So you can go submit a complaint about me. By the way, if anyone listening wants to go submit a complaint about me, this is how you do it. You go to the CP Ontario website and you look up complaints, and you can submit one from anywhere in the world, and you have to fill in this form that tells the people you're complaining to just why I'm a disgrace to the profession. But the first question you're asked is that if you were a client of mine, because, you know, you think that might be relevant, and I think it's 4 out of the 6 complainants whose complaints they are pursuing claimed in writing at the beginning of their complaints to be clients of mine, which they weren't. And not only were they not clients of mine, they didn't know any clients of mine, and they didn't even know any of the people whose feelings I'd hypothetically hurt by my tweets. And that was the beginning of the complaint process. And so I pointed that out to them, you know, because I sent them like 40 questions, none of which they answered. And one of them was, well, doesn't it strike you as somehow odd that you're taking the word of someone who doesn't even live in the country often, who was never a client of mine, who claimed in writing to be one, and that's the basis of your prosecution, let's say. And their answer was, well, we don't have to answer any of your stupid questions. And
it's
I
ridiculous.
thought, yeah, well, we'll see about that.
Let me ask you about something else sort of vaguely attached to it. But the Russell Brand scandal, for example, raises a number of issues.
Oh, here we go.
You know, I've felt quite strongly for a while since the Me Too, Time's Up campaigns came along.
Here we go.
Not that I had any objection to very bad people getting their comeuppance. Good, I'm glad they have. But the due process was getting flatlined time after time. in these campaigns with particular instances. And this strikes me as another one where Russell Brand has been accused by a number of women, anonymously in most cases, of serious allegations, rape and sexual assault and so on. He's vehemently denied them.
How dare they remain anonymous? I want to send my fans to give them a stern talking to.
He's already being cancelled, left, right and centre by corporations, by politicians trying to stop tech companies paying him any money, and so on and so on. Almost like the world is...
He's already being cancelled. The man who had a lifelong career of being a sex pest, where multiple people were speaking out about it. And now there's multiple documented instances of him doing sexual assault, sexual harassment. And now we have new allegations of, yes, rape. And one of the women who was allegedly raped by Russell Brand checked in to a rape crisis center where she's medically documented there to have received antibiotics and other treatment after that encounter. She texted Russell Brand and told Russell Brand that he had sexually assaulted her. He apologized afterwards via another confirmed text message.
He's acting as judge, jury, and executioner before this guy has had a chance.
By the way, he never had his YouTube channel taken down. That never happened. He got demonetized on YouTube temporarily. They're looking into it. Burger King is no longer sponsoring him. So again, I don't know what are private corporations actually allowed to do in the right-wing world. I don't understand this. You know, you're the capitalists. You're the one that want all this private industry that grow into monstrous monopolies that just dominate every single fucking sector of our lives. And they also don't have any autonomy when it comes to wanting to be associated with other individuals. They can't pick and choose that. Like, once you have chosen to sponsor someone, you must sponsor them for life, no matter what comes out about that individual. I'm so confused.
No idea where the truth lies yet with Russell Brand, other than he vehemently denies these allegations. But they are allegations, and they have not yet gone through due process. Why are we now doing this to people, where they get eviscerated, destroyed, cancelled, ruined, and convicted in the court of public opinion before they ever really get a chance to go through proper legal process?
By the way, women who were sexually harassed and sexually assaulted by Russell Brand had made complaints. In one case, one of the women made a complaint to the BBC, specifically talking about how he had exposed himself to her. He then apparently went on his BBC radio program and then joked about it. Didn't go anywhere. It's one of those things where, like, the statistics in the UK are so grim. It's like, 1 in 100 rape accusations leads to a criminal charge. That's, or is it go to trial? I'll double check that one sec just to make sure that is true. But, like, horrifying. Why is that? When people do not remain anonymous, they're apparently hunting for clout. They're clout chasing. Oh yeah, it's kind of weird. A woman would come out and talk about Brett Kavanaugh decades afterwards. Yeah, kind of suspicious. Oh, it's weird that all these women are now talking out about Russell Brand. As soon as he has a YouTube channel, it's also kind of suspect. It's like, oh, well, okay, in this case, women are anonymous. Oh well, anonymous women, anonymous accusers. Okay, that sounds really credible. People not even willing to put themselves on the record for these accusations. It's like you can't win with these people.
Well, part of it is, we have people that we admire and that we aspire to be, and sometimes for better or worse, they're often celebrities, and we love them, but we kind of hate them too because they're so annoying, because they're better than us in many ways, and that's why we admire them. And so, on the one
why
hand,
are they better than? They're just more famous. That doesn't make them better. I am not better than anyone who has a smaller show than me. That's not a thing. Oh, celebrities they're better. They're god kings among us, and we have to love them.
Elevate them to a status that we probably shouldn't have elevated them to, but on the other hand, we're pretty damn happy when we can, fling them to the ground and peck off all their feathers, especially if we can do that at no cost to ourselves. And social media enables that tremendously, because you can generate a mob of accusers and they can be anonymous, and you can do that in no time flat, and you can peck the feathers.
By the way, we're almost halfway through. I think we're going to run out of time before the great Hassan debate starts.
1 year, I sat in my studio.
Oh, no,
and we had what was an extraordinary interview. Got very emotional.
Did I miss that?
One part of it.
1 hour later.
It's a strange thing to have far more than you could ever imagine.
What do you mean?
Well, that's my life. I have far more than I could ever imagine. I didn't think it was possible.
I mean, you've become somebody who, in the later stage of your life...
Now you did it again. You got me again. God damn it.
Jordan,
what did Pierce do? just by praising you? That's it? Now, Jordan Peterson, you're certainly one of the smartest men, one of the most incredibly intelligent speakers, perhaps the most intelligent man in Canadian history. So I have to ask, you know, how does that make you feel? Oh God. Oh, you're doing it right now, Pierce. Oh, you bloody hell, you scamp. Oh, look at this. Here I'm so rich and famous. I'm so smart. It's so great. Thank you. By the way, I'm not mocking men crying. Men crying is beautiful and base, and all of you, if you're a man, you should fucking cry more. Normalize men crying. Tears are a fucking many splendid thing. Don't cry if someone is just like, hey, so you got everything. You're amazing. You're incredible. You're the best person ever. Oh God, I wasn't ready for that one.
Off someone, and you can walk away feeling real good about yourself, and you can be happy that you got to express your resentment and bitterness, and away you go. And of course you sacrifice someone for doing that, but it's not you, and that's just fine. And so we're doing that non-stop. And social media definitely enables that, and that's a huge danger. So social media enables narcissistic...
It's the same thing, like if I mock someone for fucking, like Ron DeSantis for smiling weird. I'm not trying to mock people smiling. Smile. Smiling is awesome. I naturally smile when I'm happy or I'm laughing. It just, I don't have to think about it. I don't have to do that weird thing he does with his face, where all of a sudden he's like, oh, I'm supposed to smile now. So he's like... You know, that shit. Yeah, that's weird and creepy and fucked.
Psychopathy. And that's not good, because we've virtualized the world and we put a tremendous amount of power in the hands of narcissistic psychopaths. And I don't say that lightly, by the way. There is quite a clinical literature on trolls online, accusatory trolls. And accusatory trolls online tend to be anonymous.
Oh shit, everybody. We got some breaking news on Elon Musk and X. The bankers who financed Elon's acquisition of Twitter are considering cutting their losses and repossessing the platform from him. If things deteriorate further, the company's bankers, already nursing billions in on paper losses, face the prospect of taking back the keys to a diminished platform that is worth less than even half their claim on it. I would be astounded if it's worth like $6 or $7 billion at this point. Okay, you know what? No, maybe 7 billion. Okay, we'll say fairly 7 billion. Okay, but yeah, he ran that shit into dirt. It was assessed at what, 22 billion. He paid twice what it was worth, which I think is like, there's got to be like what, shotgun clause-esque tier things for like CEOs and shareholders at a certain point where it's like, if someone is willing to overpay for your company to such a grotesque degree, then you have to accept it. Everyone does. You don't get to sit back and say no. You got to vote alongside yes, because this is within all of our beneficial financial duty to sell, baby. He wants to pay us twice the value for something that is only twice turned a profit. Twitter's only twice turned a profit in its history. So let's do it. Yeah, hell. Amazing.
And they tend to have dark triad personality characteristics, and that's narcissistic, Machiavellian, psychopathic, and because that wasn't enough, it was the dark triad to begin with, they had to add sadistic, which means takes a positive delight in the untoward suffering of others. And so that's the virtual world, and that's the world we live in to a large degree now, and so the accuser has all the power. And that's a real technical problem as well as a moral problem. And that's what's happened to Russell. Now, Russell, you know, I mean, Russell's sexual behavior was exactly the kind of hedonistic nightmare that all the radicals and progressives are rah-rah-rahing about nonstop, except when it comes to visit them at home, let's say. And he was celebrated for his womanizing, and he's apologized for that, and he stopped drinking, and he stopped taking cocaine. And usually people who engage in licentious and impulsive behavior of the sort that's liable to get you in trouble are extraordinarily intoxicated by alcohol at the time of doing it.
He's never apologized to the public. He has apologized to one of the victims for sexual assault, but he hasn't apologized to the public for the sexual assault. That's very, very different. He hasn't admitted. He's actually vehemently denied all the allegations against him that these women have proposed, including a 16-year-old who claims that she was groomed and raped by him. He hasn't said that he did not sexually assault her. I mean, his implication is simply that, yes, he did have sex with a 16-year-old when he was 30, but that it's technically illegal in the UK. So, you know, here comes Ben Shapiro to defend someone accused of grooming and raping a teenager.
So the mere fact that he's, you know, become sober in recent years and also attempted to atone for his.
By the way, please stop associating simply drug use, addiction of any kind with rapists, as in like, well, you know, he was very intoxicated. He was very high on cocaine back in the day. Yes, that doesn't in any way absolve any of the actions that he's accused of. And that doesn't, not all drug addicts are rapists. Not all rapists are drug addicts. You know, they keep bringing that up and invoking it like, oh, by the way, he did, you know, talk about how he used to be really shitty back in the day, you know. Sorry, this is a reaction to a couple of minutes ago. They said, kind of, yes, corporate board members have a duty to manage a corporation for the benefit of shareholders. Yes, a fiduciary responsibility. If a corporation is operating, the board can determine that the shareholders would benefit more from selling, but if a corporation is for sale, the board has a fiduciary obligation to take the best bid. And, I mean, double the public share value is it's a pretty good deal.
Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. This show is produced by amazing people like you, and if you want to help us out, please consider donating over at patreon.com/theserfs. The show is made possible thanks to Amazing Fletch, Anna Loves Riley, Ariane McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Laminia Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Pappy, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby K, Sir Nickus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Demo, Tech Tink, Trevbot EXE, Words Greenwood, and not to mention all of the amazing and fabulous people you now see before you.